Yo, what's up, man? How we living? Welcome to another episode of the May Podcast. Hold on, let me let Hillside go in a little bit.
They never will. Can count on both hands how many y'all I think is real. Still ain't got no friends, just family and my brother still. I gotta wanna die for you to get that stamp and seal. You hear me?
Yo, we back with the May Podcast, man. Second episode of the third season. Like we said, we're trying to come bi-weekly. I'm pretty sure this is the bi-weekly mark, right, Malcolm?
About a little bit over, but about the time
it's
that we
better
asked
than
for,
we
so.
have been in the past. Who cares, we got a special guest today. One of our roommates from Seymour A. Boy, we've known for, 6 years now? Going on 6? That's crazy.
Yeah, since 2017.
Yeah, that's crazy. My man Leon Ivy, football genius. He called Patrick Mahomes before anybody else really saw Patrick Mahomes coming out. So that's his kind of claim to fame now. That's his claim to fame. But yeah, man, this is gonna be a heavy type of football episode. If you don't really like it, I feel bad for you. But pretty much we're gonna open up with just some of our biggest surprises. We'll start with like good surprises, then we'll move on to disappointments. And then our last one would be kind of our final takeaway from the season, whether it's about teams or players. So I think starting off with biggest surprises, I think Jalen Hurts is definitely up there for me. Especially this year. This year was kind of for me, and I feel like a lot of the Eagles fans was really like a make or break season. As in, if he didn't play well this year, they're probably going to draft somebody else. And I know he made improvements, but the leaps he made this year really shocked me. It took me a little by surprise. But I also feel like that's also what happens when you have time to really sit there and develop in a system that's really been tailor-made to suit your strengths. So now you get to blossom. So that was one of the surprises for me was just Jalen Hurts and how he was ever able to elevate his level of play. What about you, Leon?
Yeah, well, before Leon gets to that real quick, I wasn't even like, I don't know if I'm in the minority, and then Leon probably can touch on this because he actually foreseen like Hurts making that leap going into the following year with the supporting cast that he was getting or whatever. And for me, I did think it was kind of unfair that he was already on the hot seat considering he already took the team to the playoffs the year before. They just lost first round to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, team in that regard. So I did think he was on a hot seat, but I thought it was unfair though. I think he kind of handled all that scrutiny and all that, all those expectations pretty well this year. He was very well could have been MVP just with the valuable aspect of the team. You know what I'm saying? Like the team obviously went through a little bit of, a situation when he wasn't healthy in the latter portion of the season. And then when he came back, you seen the spark. I mean, just his presence, because you can watch some of those playoff games and he's not even throwing the ball 20 times and they're still dominating teams. His utter presence alone, helped that team prosper. But I wouldn't say I was surprised, but I do think that the league made was impressive.
What about you, Leon?
Yeah, nah, them Eagles, that team was just built crazy all season. So you knew you had to make that jump. Then you add a number one receiver. That's all. I ain't gonna talk about it too much, but we know that's coming for Lamar next season once we grab a boy too. So, that's all it takes.
Speaking of Lamar, where y'all think he's gonna go? I mean, it's talks about them trading him. And I keep, like, every time I go on, like, Twitter or Instagram, I be seeing people talking about he's going to get traded to the Falcons. I hope he doesn't. That's a terrible situation for him. I hope he does not end up. I would like to see him on the Jets. I'm not going to lie.
I mean, the Jets would.
I like the Jets. I think the Jets is a solid fit. I think the Jets have a great – I think, truthfully, the reason why they wasn't winning games is because of the play calling and because of the quarterback play. They started off pretty hot. You know what I'm saying? Well over 500 going into like week 8, week 7 or whatever. Then they just start plummeting and losing games in the fourth quarter, whatever. And I feel like Lamar most definitely take that team over the edge. He'll be the final piece. But yeah, no, I think Lamar to the Jets would be dope. Still in the AFC, so you still get those perennial matchups that you want, whether it's Jets versus Chargers, Jets versus East, Jets versus any of the mega quarterbacks you'll see in the AFC. So keep them in the AFC. Those are good matchups for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Man, Josh Allen to be in the same division, that'd be crazy.
Yeah,
that would be crazy.
If Ravens lose Lamar, they're gonna be garbage. They're gonna get exposed. Like the defense still.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
The offense is garbage. Like they don't have playmakers. So So they gonna
They
figure
And
got
the
it
crazy thing is even without Lamar, they still was like barely lost to Cincinnati.
mm-hmm.
So to
That
put that in
defense.
perspective,
defense is
so
nice. Low scoring game. They
yeah.
could. That's why with Lamar, they could be Super Bowl. I say that
Yeah.
every time. Super Bowl is with Lamar.
It's coming. It's coming.
I'm just waiting on it.
It's tough though because, like I said, you got your guy Patrick in the same conference, so you know he kind of runs the AFC. He's the new
It's
Tom
all over
Brady of
that
this area.
conference now, though.
Yeah,
I ain't gonna lie.
man. But
That's
Yeah.
what was one of your surprises this year, Malcolm? Something that caught you off guard? A pleasant surprise. We'll get into disappointments later, but what was a pleasant surprise this season?
Pleasant
Because
surprise.
I got another one if y'all don't have one.
Pleasant surprise. Honestly, man, I would probably say they won a Super Bowl, so I shouldn't really put too much emphasis on it. But I was very very pleased to see how Patrick Mahomes is going to handle losing Hill or whatever, you know what I'm saying, and then just his receiving core. A lot of people went into the playoffs thinking that, you know what I'm saying, like they might have a little bit of an issue in terms of production and stuff like that. You know, a lot of people were favoring Cincinnati because Cincinnati had their little, you know what I'm saying, run where they were like losing games back to back, but they picked it up, whatever. A lot of people were saying that like Cincinnati were probably going to make it out the AFC just because they were starting to hit their stride. And Kansas City were winning games, but it wasn't by like the fashion that they usually did. So it was great to see Patrick Mahomes not only up his level in terms of like, we all know he's a talented quarterback, but the cerebral side of it, knowing when to do check downs, knowing like how to game manage here and there, but also knowing when to make your shots. So it's the only thing to really critique him about the past few years is just like he can turn over the ball a little bit. Sometimes he's too trigger happy, but this time he really harnessed that skill into being a great quarterback day in, day out. So just seeing him make that leap with the lack of supporting cast in terms of like the receiving core was just amazing to watch. So I was really, really surprised about that. But yeah, I have a bunch of negatives that I seen last year. So that's the only positive thing that I was going to say.
That's all. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think earlier in his career, I think one of Patrick's problems, as phenomenal as he was, one of the major problems he had a lot of the time was if you looked at his drop back, he a lot of times he dropped back like 5-7 yards, take like 8-step drop backs. And I understand he had that cannon, but what that did to his offensive line is it made it harder for him to protect because now he's not stationary in this pocket area that you understand where he's going to be at. He's a little bit more unpredictable in where he's going to be, and so as an offensive lineman, that would make it a little harder on them. So sometimes I found that some of the sacks he would take isn't necessarily there it goes. Isn't necessarily because his offensive line wasn't really blocking for him necessarily, but it was more so he was kind of putting them in bad positions by taking those extra long dropbacks. So by him cutting out on those, and he did cut him out last year, but I think it really showed this year. Him cutting out on those allowed him to have an offensive line that might not, on paper shouldn't have been able to block that Eagles defensive line, but they were able to hold their own.
Mm-hmm.
I think he just been that boy doing the same things that he been doing. He need to do like it's gonna be less flashy with the fastest player in the league on, but I ain't expecting nothing less. But
yeah,
honestly.
What about you, Leon? What was a pleasant
surprise
you had? I know you want to get into the negatives, Malcolm. I got one more, bro.
I had a lot of positives.
I'm about to say, man.
I don't know why you got so many negatives. I got positives. I don't know. If I got to choose one, I'd throw some love to Geno and the Seahawks. They were supposed to be garbage.
Shout out to them.
Went to the offs.
Started
off game 1. Russ tried to come back. Told him, nah, we ain't doing that. So his team now.
I'm
about to say, Geno having like a career renaissance type deal because anybody like he went from a quarterback that got punched in the face in his own locker room, starting quarterback getting punched in the face in his own locker room, to having a franchise record for most passing yards in the season, which is ridiculous to think about in terms of like just the cast that he was with. So it's kind of insane, honestly.
So I also want to give a quick shout out to long hair Peyton Manning, as my boy Zay would say. Trevor Lawrence was balling this year.
Yeah, I think, like I said,
Yeah, it was.
Trevor Lawrence. I feel like Doug Peterson. That's a perfect pairing for him. Somebody who's a great offensive mind, great with quarterbacks. 'Cause, you saw what he was able to do with Nick Foles and Carson Wentz. We thought Carson Wentz was an MVP caliber quarterback. Not saying that he might not be that anymore, but he's clearly not what he used to be. And you could claim it's the injuries, but I feel like part of it is just Doug Peterson understood his player perfectly and knew how to put him in perfect situations. And it's good seeing Trevor Lawrence get into a situation after having that whole debacle with Urban Meyer. Like, that was crazy. Just crazy. I couldn't believe that was the man that was whooping Michigan ass for years, and he didn't even know who Aaron Donald was when he was a head coach. Like, that's crazy to me. And then the Geno thing, I think that was a pleasant surprise, but I also think it kind of caused him to question just how good really is Russell Wilson combined with, we'll get into the disappointments this year, combined with how he performed this year. Like, how
that's a disappointment. But we're not doing that. Let's not don't do that. Let's not start that.
I think it's a genuine
let's
question.
Please.
But one more surprise.
Nah, man. I go ahead.
One more surprise. I got to get it out because I'm a Lions fan. Shout out to Jared Goff and the Lions offense. First weeks, I know we were losing a lot of games, but like we lost to the Eagles, we put 40 on them. We lost to the Seahawks, we damn near put 50 on them. Defense got better as the year progressed, but I think really our DBs are really weak because I think we had like a top 10, top 7 rushing defense, but we just couldn't defend the pass because our DBs are a little soft. And look, eyeing that Jalen Ramsey talk about him getting traded from the Rams. I'm kind of eyeing that. Hopefully we can do something with that. But Jared Goff really surprised me, just because I didn't think he could ever play like that, and he put up numbers that statistically, if you put them up to Josh Allen, they look very similar. It's just that Josh Allen had more touchdowns. But shout out to Jared Goff, man.
Just one more surprise. Defense. I had J.C. Horn. My boy got hurt last year, but in the stretch end of that season, him and the Panthers was locking down under I forgot the head coach that they had moved on from. But shout out that black man. They almost made it.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think J.C. Horn. I think it's a couple corners that was slept on this year. I think J.C. Horn was one of them. Marlon Humphrey was great this year as well. But you just had people like Sauce just being so great, Woodland being so great. It was tough. It was tough.
Sauce too, but let's see.
All right, Malcolm, I'm gonna let you go ahead and take the lead with the disappointments because you said you had so many negatives.
Well, I actually, I actually have one more positive thing to say. Shout out to the Giants for, actually having a over 500 squad. They surprised me. I ain't gonna front. They did surprise me. I think the head coach may be a good fit for them. He is a firehouse, you know what I'm saying? He got the defense rallying behind the team or whatever. Then they pretty much kept Saquon upright, you know what I'm saying? A pretty old school smash mouth type football team, you know what I'm saying? Granted, I only felt like it was only going to take them so far because like in this day and age, you need a quarterback and you need a high powered offensive system or whatever. But I feel like once that time progressed, they'll figure that part out. But they have the foundation with a great head coach, inspirational head coach with a good defense, and you still have Saquon, who still has at least 4 or 5 years in the tank in terms of like producing at a high level. So shout out to the Giants because they most definitely surprised me too. Now I'm gonna get into the negatives. You mentioned it earlier. Russell Wilson, man, I've probably been the biggest Russell Wilson supporter because a lot of people don't like Russell Wilson for outside football reasons, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then they pinned the whole thing of him being a system quarterback, which I wanted to debunk really, really quick because I don't think that Geno's performance is an indicator of Russell Wilson being a system quarterback. I think what that was him being thrusted into a position where he had opportunity to showcase his talent. And also people wasn't scouting for Geno. Like, let's keep it real. Like, we know situations where like when someone first comes into a starting position and they're not really thinking about him that much, they usually have a good season. With Colin Kaepernick's first season, not to say it like that, he had a really great first season when he started, but they wasn't really scouting for him. The second season, it was a little bit of a dip off. You can say that about a bunch of quarterbacks that come in, have a great first season, and then the second season, not so much. And then I also think it's circumstantial too, because I do feel like, ironic enough, Russell Wilson was just asking for better protection and maybe a couple more weapons on offense. He leaves, and Geno gets exactly what Russell Wilson was asking for in terms of better protection and a little bit more high power offense. So that's one. Now getting to the negative Russell Wilson, I just don't understand the disconnect there. I mean, great running game, better offensive line. You know what I'm saying? Like a solid receiving core. Even if he wasn't producing at a high level, that would be one thing, but he was literally costing his team games, which is he is like not known for doing. Like this is historically his worst season like ever. You know what I'm saying? And all great quarterbacks has had that season before, whether it was Peyton Manning in the second to last year. Tom Brady had one of those seasons, I want to say, after he came off the ACL tear or whatever, or ankle, when he broke his ankle, whatever. So it happens, but I don't think it was supposed to happen in this magnitude to where like he's literally like Achilles heel of the team. You know what I'm saying? Like he's literally the Achilles heel of the team. That was probably the most shocking thing that I've seen, a disappointing thing I've seen as a Russell Wilson supporter, because I've always felt like he's a top 5 quarterback in the league when given the right opportunity. So, but that was easily the most disappointing thing of the season.
Being the Brady fan I am, I got to look up that that fact, because I don't remember any season Brady lacking costing his team games. That man's a winner. I know Leon can agree with me, fellow Brady.
Well, it's relative because, I'm about to say it's relative because,
That's the GOAT, though,
Yeah, that was actually going to be my choice for most of the disappointing. Them Bucks, man. It was a long season. Boys dragged their way.
Oh, yeah.
Losing record. I don't know what it was. I'm watching them. Offense can't get going. We can't hook up with nobody. And like Tom, he was still throwing it, but it wasn't working out. Bruce Arians was gone, and maybe that meant more than what it seemed like. But I don't know. We couldn't even run the ball like Super Bowl Lenny.
Lombardi, Lenny, yeah, on God. I think a part of it is just, I'm pretty sure Ryan Jensen missed most of the year. I know he came out for the playoff game, but he missed most of the year. And I think he's the top 5 center in the league. But I feel like they just had too many injuries on the offensive line to where they're kind of inconsistent. And so when you can't run the ball as a team, and it's not like Tom Brady has the ability to run around like a Patrick Mahomes where he can extend plays. He's kind of limited in terms of he got to sit in that pocket. He can't really run nowhere, go nowhere. He got to sit in that pocket. But I think even bigger shock for me on the Bucs side was their defense, just because they didn't really lose any pieces. They just kind of were just very inconsistent on that end, which was very uncharacteristic to me. But I think another disappointment, just because I live in Indy and I got to say it, I would definitely have to go with the Colts.
Matt Ryan, that's a fact. I forgot about that.
Yeah, Matt Ryan just shit the bed. I don't know what was happening this year between Matt Ryan, and I feel like Frank Reich, I feel like Frank Reich and Carson Wentz kind of were thrown under the bus. I don't really think Frank Reich should have got fired, just because he doesn't really have too much control in terms of constructing the team. And for years now, the team's biggest problem has been the quarterback, and they've been trying to just find like these Band-Aid replacements. And I feel that falls more on the GM. So I feel like Chris Ballard wasn't getting looked at enough, because really Carson Wentz didn't play bad. Like I felt Carson Wentz played good enough to where he really probably should have just stayed in Indy. Compared to what Matt Ryan did, you probably would have been better off with Carson Wentz as your starting quarterback this year, to be honest.
Nobody was expecting Matt Ryan to be that bad, though. That's the thing. Like when you get Matt Ryan, you seeing Matt Ryan still throw 4,000 yards with a subpar cat. You think he about to come into the situation with a, way better. But nah, I can't blame the front office for that. But at the same time, it's like nobody was expecting Matt Ryan to be
it's not
play
just
that subpar.
It's not even just completely on just Matt Ryan. It's also on the fact that you have the highest paid offensive line in the league, and they were underperforming. Like Quentin Nelson was very underwhelming this year. Everybody on that offensive line was very underwhelming too. So again, I feel like, even though Matt Ryan was disappointing, I feel like the Colts as a whole were disappointed because they couldn't live up to the promises that they gave Matt Ryan in terms of you have Jonathan Taylor, so you don't really have to worry about throwing the ball like that because he can carry most of the load. But Jonathan Taylor wasn't really able to do anything this year. That's because that offensive line was getting destroyed almost every game. And so when you don't have that run game, you don't have that pass protection for someone who's as old as Matt Ryan and limited in terms of mobility and being able to extend plays on the scramble. I guess it makes sense, which is why I also feel like, you got to call in Chris Ballard a little bit because, you're the one who's making these final decisions on these players that are on your team. You're the one who's paying all these people, and they obviously haven't. And I don't think they were really that good in terms of pass protection last year either. So it's like, you were saying all these things, but you're not living up to your end of the bargain, and that kind of makes Frank Reich's job harder because he can't call certain plays because he knows he doesn't have his offensive line isn't going to block for that long. But I still expected them to at least make the playoffs this year. So to see them not even make the playoffs and just be as bad as they were was very, very shocking to me.
Welcome to the club of not making the playoffs.
Hey. Surprised you ain't saying anything.
I don't think any of our favorite teams. I'm about to say between me and AY, none of our teams have made the playoffs in the last.
Hold on. That's another disappointment.
3 years, maybe.
That's another disappointment. Got to talk about my man Matthew Stafford and the Rams because what the fuck was going on over there, bro? Man, I'm like, okay, I got my surrogate, team over there with Matthew Stafford and them niggas shit the bed too. And it started with week 1. Oh no. Oh no. Now Bobby, man, we had Bobby Wagner come in. I'm like, oh, we finna be nice. Nope. Should have just tried to kept Von Miller or something. I don't know. We had Von Miller left. Our pass rush just became non-existent. Jalen Ramsey was not saying he was terrible, but he was uncharacteristic for the type of standard that we hold him to and that he holds himself to, that he usually performs at. He wasn't Jalen Ramsey this year. He started getting back to how he plays towards the end of the year, but at the beginning of the year, it reminded me of the Bucks game with Mike Evans on their Super Bowl run, and then in the Super Bowl, he was just getting toasted, and it was just very uncharacteristic of him to be performing that bad. But yeah, I guess you lose Andrew Whitworth and you have no offensive line, you can't really get nowhere. But man, they dropped off the face of the
I don't know. I kind of knew the Rams weren't going to be as good though, because it's usually when you win a Super Bowl, it's a lot of scrambling around in terms of the roster or whatever. People destinies were fulfilled, so they start to find other team paid stuff like that. So I kind of knew it was going to be a legitimate run. But they did digress a lot than what I was expecting them. Kind of feel bad because I think Aaron Donald could have easily just retired off of that Super Bowl. Came back, they talking like they about to have a good squad, and then look what though. Yeah, no, that was very, very crazy. Leon, what's your disappointment outside of Russ?
My other one was probably that Raiders trio that did Devontae.
Oh yeah,
I heard so much about Adams, Waller, Renfro, and I like Renfro, but he not who they say he is for sure. So I don't know. Stay healthy. We play no games. Derek Carr out the door. It's gonna be interesting to see how they pivot, especially I'd be having to watch some coaches for real that's attached to Brady because they be they try to take the credit away from Brady, and you got Josh McDaniels in there running the show, and they have the run game going. Josh Jacobs was a beast this year for sure, but not much else.
Man,
I did forget about that.
I just think it's crazy. While we talking about coaches, that Eric Bieniemy had to leave to go to the Redskins as kind of this interim spot to prove that he can be a head coach. When you have people like Josh McDaniels who've been able to ride. Not saying he's not a good coach, but he's already been a head coach before at Denver and he failed. And then, he gets to kind of ride the coattails of Tom Brady's success in terms of, look at the body work I've done. Shit, I could do that shit if Tom Brady's my fucking quarterback. God damn, I don't have to do shit. What the fuck am I calling plays for? He's going to change that shit at the line anyways. Tom, you got it, bro. I'm going to just sit here and enjoy the show.
That's a fact.
I know somebody else disappointed me, though.
I will say that I'm making a declaration. I feel like I feel like the Bills' time is up now because I feel like knocking at the door three, 4 times, and I think it's over because you only get so many you only get so many opportunities to be in that, and it's crazy because every time it's like close or near that time for them, and every time it's like just too short. And I feel like that run of being in the divisional or conference finals is not happening. I just feel like it's over with. I feel like that little buzz that's going on over there is going to die down. The offense, you can only produce at such a high level for so long over there. People are going to start leaving and stuff like that. Like, I already think that it's over, but like after this season, if they don't even make it to the AFC Championship, then it's really over because I feel like they already had like 3 or 4 times knocking at the door and just haven't made a Super Bowl. And yeah, no, I think this team is going to get restructured very soon if they don't make the Super Bowl next year or even make it deep into the AFC Championship. So, but that's a declaration more than anything.
Agree wholeheartedly. Joe Burrow over Josh Allen for sure. Now took that jump. Josh just don't win none of the games. Like Lamar get the ridicule for not winning no playoff games yet, and Josh got a couple games for sure, but he ain't beat none of the quarterbacks in the primetime games. So
I think to add to that, it's a lot of times where I feel like you're watching Bills game and they'll come out red hot, they'll start dominating, and it's like a couple drives, a couple plays where you're watching like what the fuck is going on? Like your Josh Allen will just throw some bonehead pass, they'll just have some dumb mistake every time. Like somebody might fumble, and it's just like I don't know what it is, but it happens at least once or twice a game where they have all this momentum and they lose it because they start making dumb mistakes. So yeah, I think I would put the Bills. I mean, I know they had a good season, but I had them winning the Super Bowl this year. So to see them go from what they look like Super Bowl favorites, Josh Allen, a MVP candidate, leading the MVP conversation to where they ended up, just terrible, man. It was just terrible. See, we talked about positives, negatives. I mean, before we move on, real quick, I just I gotta ask my man Leon because he's the OBJ expert, man. He got that man's number, everything. He be in contact with him. So where we going, man? I've heard the Chiefs might be a good fit for him because they don't really got a number one receiver like that. So Chiefs a decent fit for him. I've heard, maybe he might go join Lamar with the Jets. Where OBJ going, man?
I have no clue, honestly. I was expecting Odell to play football this year at some point, so I'm just waiting for greatness to touch the field again. Hopefully, he could team up with Lamar. I don't see Lamar leaving Baltimore, so I'm guessing it's got to be a Baltimore thing, but not too far from New York. I don't know.
They're gonna have to pay that man. They're gonna have to pay that man Lamar his money though, because you see what he's talking about in terms of like what he want to get paid, which rightfully so. I don't see anything wrong with that. I really don't. Like I don't think he asking for nothing crazy. Y'all want a franchise quarterback. I mean, if y'all can pay Joe Flacco all that money y'all paid him after the Super Bowl, y'all can most definitely give Lamar a couple hundred million. Just what I'm saying.
They really played themselves because look at the division. Deshaun, like when people are setting their markets, like the closer you get to them, the more it's gonna be. And Kyler had got his contract or whatever contract talks. Then Deshaun came to the same division, got the contract that he got. Joe Burrow coming up, and he going to Super Bowl. So now they expected money for Burrow is out the roof. So like they should have paid him before all this happened. Then they probably could have talked about some restructuring, or you feel me? Then have him more prove himself. But at this point, like they played themselves. So.
I'm about to say you gonna either pay him that money or he gonna go somewhere else and get that money or whatever. Which I know, I genuinely feel like Lamar wants to stay in Baltimore. You know what I'm saying? Like I think he really does want to stay there. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, it's like again, knowing your value, knowing your worth or whatever. You know what I'm saying? The only thing that he has to not fall victim to is like getting that money and not showing improvement. You know what I'm saying? Because that's genuinely what becomes a problem. That's when the ridicule really happens, is when you do get that big contract and the following year you don't show why you deserve that contract. So that's the only thing that I would say. He most definitely got to show improve next year. But that starts with the offensive line keeping them upright. You know what I'm saying? Him having a better mix of like running, passing the ball, which I think as time progressed, he's most definitely has managed that a lot better. But I don't think it's him just having bad games. I just think it's just like getting banged up here and there, you know what I'm saying? And then obviously the receiving core's always been an issue. The supporting cast has always been an issue and stuff like that, play calling. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the past 2 years, this year, like they barely lost to Cincinnati. It's because Lamar got hurt. And then the year before that, when they went against Buffalo or whatever, like Buffalo was supposed to watch them, but they didn't, and Lamar wasn't in that game too. Look at all the major instances where they could have were on the verge of being like a high perennial Super Bowl team. Lamar either got hurt or it was a situation where like the supporting cast just wasn't up to par. So I do think that like it hasn't really been Lamar for the most part. Outside of maybe like the Tennessee game and like 3-4 years ago. Like outside of that Tennessee playoff game where he was running more than usual, I don't ever think that like any of the plays have been his fault. I mean, shit, he ain't been in games for it to be his fault. So
you know, all in that game too.
Yeah.
Honestly, them two years of nagging injuries for Burrow, really, that's kind of what opened the window for Burrow anyway. Because if I'm not mistaken, both times he got injured, they was in the lead for the AFC North. So,
yeah, it's just seeing how they play with Tyler Huntley, and you know Tyler Huntley plays which I think Tyler Huntley's a great fit in terms of being able to run the same plays and scheme. Obviously, he's not the same player Lamar is, but in terms of like a lot of the times, if you just take a glance at the TV screen that Tyler Huntley's on, if you're not paying attention, you're gonna think it's Lamar at a slight glance. But going back to that, I think they won that. I think they might have had a case of gone to the Super Bowl this year. They had Lamar because in my opinion, they almost beat the Bengals without Lamar, and it's really just because Tyler Huntley fumbled at the goal line trying to extend. I feel like they win that game. Lamar's there, and not only win that game, I feel like
that was a crazy play.
Blowout, to be honest, because Lamar, it's no way in hell Lamar not gonna score the goddamn ball. So I feel like they win that one. I think they probably give the Chiefs a better fight just because they had a better defense than the Bengals, and then Lamar. Even though Patrick Mahomes got pretty much everybody number in the fucking league except for Tom Brady and Joe, but he always plays well against Patrick. So it's not like he would have just laid over. He would have gave Patrick a good fight, and I think with the improvements their defense made, and it was funny because at the beginning of the year, they would play great. Lamar would play well, and then their defense all of a sudden would just like completely fall apart, which I thought was kind of funny at the beginning. I'm glad they kind of tied it up the end. Like I think a great example of that is that Miami game where they're completely just dominating the Dolphins, and all of a sudden they just leave Tyreek Hill wide open for one play, and everything just falls apart there. But on top of that, I think I want to add one more disappointment before we move on to kind of like our final takeaways from the season and kind of what we can expect moving into the next season. I got to talk about Kyler Murray, man, and the Cardinals, because Kyler got paid all this money. I thought it was funny going to the offseason. Everybody's talking about, he don't really look at the playbook. He don't study film, none of that stuff. And he just rather play Call of Duty. He's not like me talking about, he's never won a game when Call of Duty has had a double XP weekend, which is fucking hilarious to me. But it's like how you demand all this money, you do all this stuff, and you just completely just were underwhelming this year. And it's not like you didn't have the weapons, because you definitely have the weapons in that environment. But he was very underwhelming this year. Cliff Kingsbury, I don't know how the hell he keeps getting these jobs, because if you look at his record in college, he was losing in college, and he gets an NFL head coaching job for losing in college because he had some great talent like Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes, but he was still losing with those people. I think that's just kind of weird. I think it's something you only see, Eric Bieniemy again. That goes back to Eric Bieniemy, how he's been having these great runs as his offensive coordinator, can't get a head coaching job. Meanwhile, you got somebody who's had had a Heisman-winning quarterback and another quarterback who was putting up great numbers at Texas Tech and was still losing games. And if you look at just the numbers, like the first half of the season, he's great. Second half of the season, he does not know how to finish. And we saw that last year with the Cardinals. I think this year we didn't even really see them get off to a good start. They were just terrible. And then Chandler Jones too. Like I don't know what happened to him, but he was just He wasn't there. JJ Watt was still not the JJ Watt of old, but JJ Watt was still pretty consistent. So I was sad to see him retire. I would have liked to have seen him at least play one season with
His
his
time was
brothers.
up. His time was up. He was banged up. This man was
I get it.
like you got him and Brian Cushings from early 2010s. Brian Cushings tore his ACL 3 times, and then you got JJ Watt having he damn near got a leg. He got a leg brace for an arm brace. Like the man was banged up. Like he got all types of metal or all types of stuff in his body just from all the injuries and stuff that he's taken. You know what I'm saying? Especially in the way he played football, being an interior lineman and a defensive end. It was time. You know what I'm saying? It sucks he didn't get a championship. It also sucks that he didn't get an MVP. You know what I'm saying? Because you could have argued that one season he could have got it in terms of how valuable he was. Probably had one of the most historic years outside of maybe Aaron Donald. Probably had one of the most historic years as a defensive lineman in NFL history. But I think the body of work and just what he was able to do speaks for itself. You know what I'm saying? Like I think people are gonna remember JJ Watt as like a top 5, maybe like for sure top 10 defensive lineman of all time, pass rusher of all time.
I think
all
he's
that.
top
So
2. I think the only person, in my opinion, I mean, I could be biased, but in terms of what I've seen, the only person I would say is better than JJ Watt at defensive line is the Aaron Donald. To be honest, I think you can make the conversation that JJ might be a top 3 defensive player of all time. I mean, you know, I think he deserves to be in that conversation with people like LT and Aaron Donald. I'm not saying he's definitely, but I'm saying he's in that conversation for it.
I got him above LT all time. I'm sorry. I know that's not the most popular thing to say, but LT was dominant, but it's not moving me like that. I'm sorry. Like it is, maybe it's because I also play defense, so I understand. But it's like 3-4 defense. All you have your one-on-one matchups most of the time. You playing against quarterbacks that aren't that athletic, and you got JJ Watt was doing what Aaron Donald was doing before Aaron Donald came into the league. So like that whole move around, do interior work, one technique, 3 technique, outside, all that. Like he was doing that like at a high level for 4 or 5 years before Aaron Donald was even thought of. And then you got to think the outside stuff in terms of batting down ball. He probably has the most deflections as any defensive lineman of all time. So there's that, interceptions, his athleticism, how people scout for him. I'm sorry. I know people were scared of LT because he had all these sacks and he was unpredictable, but AJ Watt's better than him all time in terms of defensive player. Like that's not even a question.
I don't know how Leon gonna feel about this, but I gotta say, I think LT probably one of, if not the most overrated player ever. Not saying he's not great, but how people be talking about him, I'm like, bro, you could tell him to drop back in coverage. I think it was stupid if you gonna tell him to drop back in coverage, but he was just gonna blitz anyway. So I get the unpredictable nature in terms of what he was gonna do pass rush rise, but like you know what LT was gonna do. LT not gonna drop back in coverage. He's just gonna run at you every time. But yeah,
I could probably name 12 defensive players better than LT all time. Like literally Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu. I just named Aaron Donald. I could name even I can argue Reggie White was better than him. Bruce Smith. I can name a bunch. Ray Lewis. I can name like 12 defensive players better than him all the time. I won't say that in public because whatever, but Dion, like Ronnie Lott, like I'm just saying, like hella. But I mean, it's the legacy talk, so we know what that is. It's the impact and legacy. So,
how you feel about that, Leon?
I don't have no problem. I'm not no big LT guy, honestly. I'm thinking he not top 3 defensive player when you said that. I'm like, yeah, LT not in my top 3 for sure. So I don't have no qualms.
I don't even know because it's hard because even so the linebacker talk gets interesting because it's like because the linebacker joint is interesting because one, you got to think of the scheme, right? Because a 4-3 linebacker and a 3-4 linebacker is kind of different or whatever, and outside playing in a 4-3 and 3-4 is different too. So in the 3-4, a lot more pass rush stuff or whatever. That's when you get into like the TJ Watts, the James Harrisons, and those guys that are like more known for like being a special, and also Von Miller and stuff like that too. But then like when you get to linebacker talk, it's like it pretty much comes down to preference because like I would take a Ray Lewis, Brian Urlacher, maybe even like a Luke Kuechly over LT of all time just because of the cerebral aspect of knowing the game. You know what I'm saying? So even a linebacker talk, I don't know. I think it's debatable. I think in his time period in the 80s, he's probably like a top 3 most dominant defensive player in the 80s, maybe. But all time, I'm sorry. I think it's more of an influence and impact thing. And it also comes down to him winning an MVP as a defensive player. So that most definitely helps. But in terms of like skill set and knowing the game, I was never really the biggest LT fan.
I mean, he was on crack. Like, what do we expect, bro? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
But yeah,
sorry.
man.
But he was on like
I ain't mean to do like a whole detour, but yeah, no, that always bothered me. Like LT is just it was never that for me. He was just never that for me. I'm sorry.
I agree. Most old heads look at me crazy, but I'm like, I know I ain't see him play, and I get he put the fear of God into people. I'm like, I'd be more scared of Luke Kuechly than Lawrence Taylor, to be honest, because at least I know what Lawrence Taylor gonna do. He's just gonna sit at that edge and try to come at me. And not saying it's easy, but you can kind of scheme around edge rushers a little bit if you have competent offensive linemen, you can do it. But somebody like Ray Lewis, like, there's no scheming around Ray Lewis. He in the middle of the damn field. I got to deal with him one way or another. Like, it's no trying to run away from Ray Lewis or trying to have QB rollers away from Ray Lewis. You're going to have to deal with Ray Lewis because he's in the middle of the field, just like you're going to have to deal with Luke Kuechly, or you're going to have to deal with somebody like Ed Reed when he's at that single high safety because he's in the middle of the field. You have to deal with that person. But
yeah, one thing that's a commonality for any of the people we named above LT all time. We could make an argument that player on that team probably had one of the best defenses at a certain time period. So when I mentioned James Harrison, 09 Steelers, crazy. Ray Lewis, 2000s Ravens, crazy. Ronnie Lott, take your pick, 83, 84 49ers. Every team that every person that we just named was not only great as a defensive player, but they also made their team great, and they're probably on all-time defenses in that regard too. That's nobody's ever talked about the Giants' all-time defense. Let's talk about the linebacking core or whatever, but no, like nobody's ever no. Like y'all wouldn't be able to tell me all-time great. Like you actually would tell me like the Giants team in 08, 09 was better than the Giants teams back then. So to put that in perspective, so.
Guess on to the last part, just final takeaways. Kind of things that things we feel like we learned about certain players, certain teams, and kind of what that means. We feel like it means going into the next season. So for me, I think one takeaway for me is definitely that Cliff Kingsbury is just not a very good head coach in my opinion. He like I said, I mentioned before, he can't win. He has a losing record in college. Has a losing record in the NFL, and it just really kind of shocked me that he was able to get a job. So I feel like one takeaway is that Cliff Kingsbury, maybe as a coordinator or as a quarterbacks coach, he could come to the league again. But I feel like as a head coach, I don't think he should have another opportunity. So just realizing that Cliff Kingsbury is just not a very good coach, to be honest. I think that's one takeaway I have. And then one more takeaway I'll give is just the importance of the quarterback. I mean, I know we talk about it all the time, but just seeing how many of these great quarterbacks we have and just watching the team like the Jets who literally have, or like the 49ers again. I think it's funny how the 49ers, they get, not saying Brock Purdy is super great, but, Brock Purdy was better than Jimmy Garoppolo. So just giving the 49ers a quarterback who was decent, good to decent, and see what they were able to do. I think it just, we're in the age. I remember, I think it was 2011. We were talking about the year of the quarterback because it was something like we had Matthew Stafford throw for 5,000, Drew Brees threw for 5,000, Tom Brady threw for 5,000. Like it was a bunch of dudes throwing for like 5,000 yards. But I think we're really in the era of quarterbacks just because we have all these elite talents like Lamar, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. Tua could be in that conversation because he played well this year. Just quarterback is important. It's probably the most important position on the field, and we see it. We see it all the time.
I got two quick takeaways. The first one, it actually pertains to Joe Burrow a little bit. I think Joe Burrow is a great talent. I think that like he's easily a top quarterback in the league, and I also think that he's the franchise player for Cincinnati. But one thing I'm gonna say is gonna sound controversial, but this is just a projection. If they don't keep him upright in the next 2 or 3 years, he might be looking towards early retirement like Andrew Luck was. I like if you really think about just all the same circumstances that Andrew Luck went through, what Joe Burrow went through in terms of Andrew Luck, great talent. We know what his ceiling was, always producing, knew the game like tenfold or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It may not necessarily be the same prototype, but in terms of like Joe Burrow being like extremely great playmaker, understanding the game, and also being extremely clutch as a player. If they don't keep him upright and he's going to continuously be the most sacked quarterback in the league, it's gonna come a time that he might retire early, because at the same time, like you can't be that high of a player in the league and constantly get rattled as much as he does. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I know it's a situation where he loves Cincinnati, he loves the team, he loves the culture and all that, so he would never leave. And if he did leave, you know what I'm saying, he would have to be forced out the door. But I would hate for it to come a time where like he ends up retiring early just because he's constantly getting like demolished. You know what I'm saying? Like he's had like a splur of injuries like the past 2 or 3 seasons or whatever, and it's only because they still haven't gotten him the right help on the offensive line. So that's my major takeaway, is that like when I look at all of the shortcomings, it's usually for him. It's usually because he's not kept up right, and I wish that I hope they fix that sometime soon. That's the first takeaway. The second takeaway. The AFC may be running the NFL for a long time. I know we got into like a little bit of a situation years ago where we were saying, okay, there's a little bit of parity. The NFC AFC has a little bit of parity here, but now it's back to being like pretty much overwhelmingly the AFC is just going to dominate, because I feel like every year for the most part, whoever came out the AFC was going to be the Super Bowl champion. And then when you have, like, as AY mentioned, like this new reign of quarterbacks that are all pretty much on the AFC side, it's like you don't have nothing to counterbalance that unless you start having like these dominant defenses on the NFL or on the NFC side. And I don't foresee that. So I think the AFC is going to be playing the carousel role in terms of who's going to win the championship. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. But those are the two major takeaways I got.
Yeah, that was really going to be one of mine too. Like most of the AFC teams got their franchise quarterbacks or stud quarterbacks, or AFC South got 2 top 3 picks on the way. So I agree with that one wholeheartedly. I guess one of mine would just be that football is kind of like fun just because of the parity now. That I feel like it's definitely some dominant teams, but it's a lot of competition. I think the gap is starting to close between, like, from the times where we were seeing like the Brock Osweilers and stuff getting contracts, like those days. Everybody's kind of competitive now. I really just want to see what's going to start happening with running backs. It's like running back committee is kind of like the biggest thing now. We don't really see a one running back team no
That's
more.
a fact.
And nobody wants to pay them because of the injury. So like even when you have dominant seasons, like we've seen Saquon and Josh Jacobs just go off, but they contract's not here yet. So I don't know. I just want to see the next step in what running backs and what the running back position is going to look like in the NFL. I guess it's just going to keep being like young new faces every year. So I also like the receivers a lot too. I feel like the receiving talent just keeps getting better and better.
Malcolm gonna hate that I gotta say this.
Will we ever? I was gonna ask the question real quick.
Let me get this out. I gotta say it.
Will we
next year?
Okay, go ahead.
If Russ doesn't perform next year, I'm calling him a system quarterback. That's all I'm gonna say. If he has another bad year like this, I'm calling him a system quarterback. You can go ahead.
It's tough.
I don't like that, but okay. I was gonna ask the question of I was gonna ask the question of will we ever see another 2,000 yard rusher
We've come close. I mean, I don't know. I don't think so.
Nobody. It's a passing league, and nobody really getting the carries like that.
It's only one
Derrick Henry,
I'm
person.
about to
I was about to
say,
say
chance.
Derrick
He's
Henry
starting
the
to
only
break
one.
down.
Yeah, Derrick Henry the only one that's getting carries like that, and he's been getting hurt a lot lately too, and he's starting to get older in terms of age. So I think I don't know. I don't want to say it's impossible, but I think the future of the running back position is going to be people more like Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey, guys who can get you 1,000 on the ground and 1,000 through the air. These dual threat running backs
yeah,
to where you can do multiple things with them.
Yes, all purpose for sure. It's like even when
yeah,
you're winning now, like you got to be cautious keeping the ball on the ground because the team probably gonna throw up 2-3 touchdowns in a quarter at the end.
yeah. Unless you're like that methodical in terms of like just time of possession and scoring, and like I think that's what made the Eagles so crazy was because like they'll hold the ball for a long time, but they were for sure going to score it too. Like they had like the record for most opening drive touchdowns this season or whatever. So so it's most definitely like it's always a shift in football in terms of like things that work, things that don't, or whatever. At one point in time, they were talking about this season was the most low scoring season in the last 10 years or whatever. So it's most definitely like shifts and trends and stuff like that, and that's with any type of game or whatever. But I do think that like the running back situation that Leon mentioned is actually going to be interesting, considering that like Derrick Henry was out, Jonathan Taylor did like kind of regress because of the situation he was in, and a lot of these players are now supposed to be like the second comings of like the Marshall Faulks, the Alvin Kamara's, the Dalen Thompsons and stuff like that, which is dope, which is cool. But it was cool to see like a barrage of running backs like just dominating the game or whatever. But I mean, that's kind of what happens when you're starting to have like these perennial quarterbacks in the game. So
Yeah, like Leon said, it's a passing league now.
Uh, I do got to bounce, but I appreciate y'all boys.
I was about to say
having
we
me
was
on,
we was
man.
finna end the show too, so you
for
got
sure.
perfect timing.
Okay, perfect
Yeah.
timing, perfect timing. I'm gonna hit y'all lines up after this, though, for sure.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Good having you on, brother. All right, well, it's just us two. We finna end the show anyways. The show was over, so bring that hillside in real quick. We appreciate y'all taking your time out of your day, your night, your evening, whenever you listen to this, just to listen to us talk about football. We love football. God damn it. See, I hit the touchpad again. Damn. Anyways, ignore that. We had a great time topping up with our boy Leon, just talk about sports, the NFL, the football. I missed having those kind of conversations with him just because we used to have those regular back in college because we were all always in the living room in the house together, so it was easy to have those conversations. But next show we'll probably. So what are we doing next show, Malcolm? I'm not gonna lie. I know we're
gonna talk more about basketball because basketball is pretty much gonna come towards the back end of it. You know what I'm saying? There was a crazy that Boston and Philly game was so crazy the other day.
Yeah.
And then my boy Giannis got hurt, so now it's getting interesting. So,
yeah,
but we're gonna see what happens, man. Basketball talks next time.
I guess we're doing basketball. We'll get to some. It was just like I want to say 2 year. 2 year, yeah. It was like the 2 year anniversary, 3 year anniversary of what happened to Ahmaud Arbery previously. So I think we could do maybe episode just kind of touching on just the history of maybe police brutality or that's not even police brutality. I think we should do something like dealing with lynchings in America because that's really what that kind of is. Like they were trying to do a citizen's arrest, but that's really a lynching. But we could do something like that. Kind of, and maybe we'll do it. I know it's gonna be too late for Black History Month, but I feel that's an interesting topic to talk about. But we'll definitely do basketball first, and maybe that, and then I'll get into contact with Gianni. We'll have him on for an episode, kind of discuss his brand. But that's kind of the future plan for now. We appreciate y'all, like I said again, and whenever you're listening to this, whether it's morning, afternoon, night, evening, have a good motherfucking time. We out.
Niggas got me to the white meat. Then about my pain, and I can tell you this shit quite deep, but I make this look easy.